That is, the assets and liabilities are taken over. They are taken over at the book value. The purchasing company intends to carry out the business, and the shareholders, that is at least who hold at least 90% of the equity shares of the vendor company, agree to become the equity shareholders of the purchasing company. Not only this, the last point is that the discharge of equity shares happens in equity shares except for dissenting shareholders and for if you have fractional shares, right? I think the last thing we did in the last class was the net asset method. And hence, today we are going to start with the next method, which is going to be net payment method. Now, as the word suggests, in net payment, they are going to give you the instructions that how are you going to pay for the business. So the business that you're purchasing, how are you going to pay for that? So illustration 1, this is what we have already done. I am going to give you a format here, all of you. Please see very carefully, because if you will be following this format, then the chances are you will not be committing any mistake while calculating the purchase consideration by net payment method. Okay, so let's see what the format is. So the first thing is payment to. Now, what do I mean by payment to? Payment to means that whom are you making the payment? So in the question, it will be given to you whether you're making the payment to the preference shareholder or the equity shareholder. Now, this is very important to note that when you're calculating the purchase consideration, any payment that you're making to the debenture holder, is it a part of purchase consideration? Can anybody tell me yes or no? Any payment made to the debenture holder, is it a part of purchase consideration? Yes or no? I need answers. Debenture holder is not the owner of the business. So if you're discharging it by making any payment, it is not a part of purchase consideration. So please understand what is purchase consideration. Purchase consideration is the amount that you're paying to buy the business. From whom are you buying the business? From the shareholders, who are actually the owners. So any payment that you're making to the shareholder will be a part of the payment method and will be the part of the purchase consideration. Any other payment, which means that payment to the debenture holder, creditors, etc., will not be a part of purchase consideration. Am I clear? Yes or no? Please confirm. Is there any question? Any doubt? Okay, so let me just, give me a second. Yeah. So now I'm saying that the format is you're going to first write down to payment to, where you're going to write to whom are you making the payment. Secondly, you're going to write down payment in the sense, how are you going to make the payment? Are you going to make the payment by giving them the preference shares in the purchasing company? Are you going to make the payment by giving them equity shares in the purchasing company? Are you going to make the payment by giving them certain cash? So however you're going to make the payment, you're going to write it in the second column, that is payment in. Then you're going to do the working, that is also known as working note or calculation, where we're going to do the entire calculation. And finally, you will get the amount. Okay, now let's understand this. Just give me a second. So we are all going to go to the, I just want to confirm, is there anybody in the class who has J.R. Monga, the book? Please raise your hands. Do I have anybody in the class who has J.R. Monga, the book? Okay, so I'm sending the question then. Just give me a second. I'm going to share a question with you, all of you. And then we are going to understand how is net payment method done. Okay, so I'm sending it on the WhatsApp group. Okay. Just a minute. Yes, you can check. Have you received? Please confirm. Please check and confirm. Have you received, guys?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. So we're going to all read together. I'm going to read it with you. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You're going to reply to that. So listen to me. Rajnigandha Limited is absorbed by Vasundhara Limited, the consideration being the takeover of liabilities, the payment of cost of absorption as a part of purchase consideration not exceeding rupees 20,000. Actual cost rupees 17,000. The payment of the debentures of 1 lakh at a premium of 10% in 9% debentures issued at par, and the payment of rupees 16 per share in cash, and allotment of 114% preference shares of rupees 10 each and 6 equity shares of rupees 10 each, fully paid for every 4 shares in Rajnigandha Limited. The number of shares of the vendor company are 2 lakh of rupees 10 each, fully paid. Calculate the purchase consideration as per the accounting standards 14, assuming it is an absorption in the nature of purchase. Okay. What do you think will be my first question? Anybody? What will I ask you? Okay, so my first question is, who is the vendor company? Can anybody reply? Who is the vendor company? I want to know. Please reply. Read the question and tell me. Any answers? Who is the vendor company?
Rajnigandha.
Rajnigandha. Correct. That's right. So we're going to write down that's Rajnigandha. And who's going to be the purchasing company? Anyone? Who's the purchasing company? Come on, fast. Who's the purchasing company? I need the answer, please.
Vasundhara Limited.
Vasundhara.
Vasundhara, okay. All right, so this is actually the question. I'll show you, don't worry. Let's first discuss it. Okay, so you're saying Vasundhara is the purchasing. Now you say understand this. अभी तो हम बहुत ही basic level पे हैं तो आपको आप बोलोगे अब मेरा question ये होगा आपको अगर याद हो पहला question होता है who's the purchasing company, who's the vendor company. Second question is that you know whether it's in the nature of purchase or whether it's in the nature of merger. If I ask you, can anybody tell me in this question, is this can you tell me that it is whether it's in the nature of purchase or it's in the nature of merger? Anybody? Can anybody reply to that? Read the entire question and tell me, is it in the nature of purchase or merger?
Purchase.
Purchase, right. Why? Dipansh, what's the reason?
It's written in the last line.
Exactly. It's very clearly written in the last line, so you don't have to do anything. कुछ check नहीं करना. अगर सारी condition merger की होती भी और अगर आपको question में दे दिया in the nature of purchase, you have to do it as in the nature of purchase. Okay. Now comes my third question, which is going to be the calculation of PC. How am I going to calculate the PC? The moment I have to calculate the PC, I will have to say which method will I follow. As of now, we have talked about lump sum method. This is not lump sum method. It's not given that this is the purchase consideration. We have talked about the net asset method. Is it a net asset method in this question? Can I use net asset method? Yes or no? Anyone? No, we cannot use the net asset method because हमें दिया ही नहीं है कि भाई ये asset take over किए, ये liability take over की, आप PC निकालो. So हम वो method भी use नहीं कर सकते. Now comes the next, that is net payment method. हमें question में clearly दिया हुआ है कि किसके लिए कितना क्या issue करना है. For instance, I will read it out for you. If you read from this line, the third line actually, at the end of the third line, the payment of rupees 16 per share in cash, an allotment of 114% preference share of rupees 10 each, and 6 equity shares of rupees 10 each fully paid for every 4 shares in Rajnigandha Limited. It means that it is telling me कि मुझे क्या-क्या payments करनी है, right? So I go back to my format. If you remember, I just told you, I'm going to first write down the payment to, then I'm going to write down the payment in. Next is going to be my calculation, and finally I will have the amount. Let's start from the first line. Now guys, do you see that the first two lines हैं जिसमें इसने हमें बोला है payment of debentures and all that, is that of any relevance in the calculation of purchase consideration? Is that of any relevance? No. Usually you're going to get questions like this where they are going to confuse you. by telling you that liabilities and debenture holders are to be paid off, are to be taken over, and so and so. Now, but I have already told you what is a purchase consideration. Purchase consideration is the payment that you're making to the shareholders. Okay, so please keep that in mind. It is the payment that you're making to the shareholders. So therefore, the first two lines, or rather first 2.5 lines, become immaterial for you to calculate the PC. Any doubts? Excuse me. All right. So let's go ahead. It says that I am going to make a payment of rupees 16 per share in cash, an allotment of 114% preference share of 10 each, and 6 equity shares of 10 each fully paid for every 4 shares in Rajnigandha. Now, I don't know which shares are they. I mean, they haven't really specified whether it is the equity shareholder or the preference shareholder. So the first thing I write here is that payment is to be made to the shareholder. How am I going to make the payment? It clearly states the first line that rupees 16, which means I'm going to make the payment in cash, right? And how am I going to calculate it? It means 16 rupees for, please note, it says 16 per share in cash. Now, can anybody tell me how many shares are there in the vendor company? Yes, from the question, please tell me how many shares are there in the vendor company?
2 lakh.
2 lakh. So that's what I did. I said 16 rupees for every share. So which means 16 into 2 lakh, it becomes 32 lakh. Is this clear? Any question? Okay. तो एक तो कहता है कि कैश पे करना है, दूसरी लाइन में क्या कहता है? अलॉटमेंट ऑफ 14% preference shares of 10 each. So this means again I'm going to make the payment to the shareholder. How am I going to make the payment? In what? In preference shares. Now I know how much he's saying. He's saying 14% preference shares of 10 each and 6 equity shares of 10 each fully paid for every 4 shares. मतलब हर 4 शेयर्स के लिए वो कह रहा है एक प्रेफरेंस शेयर में इशू करूं 10 रुपए का. सो इट मींस टोटल शेयर्स कितने थे? 2 लाख फॉर एवरी 4 शेयर्स. सो 2 लाख डिवाइडेड बाय 4 into 10. Is this calculation clear or is there a doubt? Please tell me. Any question? If it is clear, please raise your hands. हाँ डाउट है तो बोलो. दिव्या बोलो.
No, ma'am, it's clear.
It's clear. So I guess everyone is clear about it. So Meet is also clear about it. Lipsa is clear, right? Now the last thing, last payment he's saying is, and 6 equity shares of 10 each fully paid for every 4 shares. So now I'm going to make the payment in equity shares. How? There are 2 lakh shares. He's saying I'm going to give him 6 equity shares. So that means 2 lakh into 6 for every 4 shares divided by 4. And how much is every equity share equal to? Rupees 10. So 2 lakh into 6 into 10 divided by 4, that becomes 30 lakh. And hence the total is going to be, the total purchase consideration is going to be 67 lakh. All of you, please do it in your registers. Please do it. Follow the format: payment to, payment in, working note or calculation, and final amount. So I give you what? 5 minutes to please complete this question. Yeah. You have 5 minutes. Please do it and let me know when you're done. Just let me know when you're done. Can we go ahead? Please let me know. Is the question done? Illustration 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Yes, beta, bolo.
ma'am, cost of absorption, why we don't take it?
Yeah, listen to this. What did I say? I said, what do you mean by purchase consideration? Purchase consideration होता क्या है? जब हम बिजनेस खरीद रहे हैं उसका क्या मतलब है? हम जब बिजनेस खरीद रहे हैं तो ओनर से खरीद रहे हैं, ओनर को कुछ पेमेंट कर रहे हैं. सो वट एवर पेमेंट दैट वी आर डूइंग, सी अभी हमने जर्नल एंट्रीज नहीं की हैं. This cost of absorption and everything is going to be taken care of once we do the what do you call journal entries. So all these things, like anything that you're paying to anybody who is not a shareholder, is not a part of purchase consideration. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so done, guys. Okay, so your homework is going to be illustration 3, which I will send you after the class. It's going to be a similar question on the net payment method. Okay. All right, now let's come to one more thing, which is going to be one more method. If you see, let me share my screen. Right, so this was it. We just this. So the next is like the intrinsic method or intrinsic value method, or we also call it as swap method. Now, what is this intrinsic method or swap method? If you guys remember, what is intrinsic value? Intrinsic value का मतलब क्या? कि business की actual value है कितनी? What is the worth of the business? So technically, if we are talking about intrinsic value, what are we saying? We are saying that the intrinsic value of one share is equal to the net assets divided by the number of shares. I repeat, the intrinsic value of one share is equal to the net assets divided by the number of shares. Now, there's something known as a swap method, as it means that exchange ratio, you can say. That, you know, for these many shares of the vendor company, how many shares of purchasing company are you going to give to the vendor? That's what swap method technically means. Okay, so just give me a second. Let's come to this example and try to understand it. It's going to be illustration 5. I'm going to share the picture of the question. Just give me a second, all of you. And guys, please make sure by next week you should have the book with you. I can't keep on doing this. Please buy J.R. Munga. And just a minute, I'm sharing the question. Just a minute, I don't think it's clear. It's not clear, just a minute. Yeah, okay, I'm sending it. Yeah, it's sent. Please check and let me know. Have you received the question? Illustration 5. Have you got it? Illustration 5, all of you? Please take 5 minutes to read the question first. Take 5 minutes to read the question. And raise your hands once you have done read the entire illustration 5. Once you've read the illustration 5, just raise your hands. Tanu is done. Others, please read. Both the Tanus are done. Okay, so let's understand this. Now, what are we saying? It says that the following are the balances of Pratiksha and Nidhi Limited. Obviously, my first question to all of you is going to be, who is going to tell me that who is the vendor company? Anyone? Please reply. Who is going to be the vendor company?
Nidhi.
Louder, beta. Sukhmeet, louder.
Nidhi.
Nidhi.
Nidhi. Okay, so everyone is saying Nidhi is the vendor company, right? It's Nidhi, which obviously means that who is the purchasing company?
Pratiksha Limited.
Pratiksha, right. So the first part is done. Now I have to see, it says in the question, Pratiksha Limited agrees to take over Nidhi Limited. Find out the ratio of exchange of shares on the basis of the book values. Now the moment he says that I have to find the ratio of exchange, it basically means swap value, one. Secondly, it is also saying on the basis of book value. The moment it says that's a basis on the book value, it means the intrinsic value. So how am I going to do it? If you note, all of you, I'm going to find out the net assets, because the value of one share is going to be net asset divided by the number of shares, right? So it's pure unitary method, so to say. So I'm going to calculate the net assets of Pratiksha and I'm going to calculate the net assets of Nidhi. Now, if I look at the balance sheet, I see, let me start with Pratiksha. Can anybody tell me how much is the net asset of Pratiksha? Please look at the balance sheet and tell me.
90 lakhs.
98
9
lakhs.
lakhs.
Yeah, but that is not the net asset. That means you did not listen to my question. I said how much is the net asset? 9 lakh is the total asset.
30 lakhs.
30 lakhs से कौन सा
Ma'am,
question?
6 lakh.
Okay, all right. So what I'm saying is, I'll explain it to you if you have a doubt. See, the total asset is 9 lakh, I know. Now, what is net asset? Net asset is always total asset minus the external liabilities. So if I look at the liability side, I have debenture, which is an external liability. And I also have current liabilities, which is an external liability, which means it is 3 lakh. So the net asset is going to be 9 lakh minus 3 lakh comes out to be 6 lakh. Similarly, if I go for Nidhi, I see the total of the asset side is 2,50,000 minus I have the current liabilities, that is 70,000, which means it is 1,80,000. Is it clear till net asset?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Now let's understand कि एक share की value कितनी है. Now I know that 6 lakh is for Pratiksha, the net asset, and for Nidhi it is 1,80,000. Now I also know the number of shares. How much is the number of shares for Pratiksha? Anybody? Given in the balance sheet?
20,000.
20,000. So 6 lakh divided by 20,000 comes out to be 30. That means the intrinsic value of Pratiksha is 30. Now, how much is the number of shares for Nidhi given in the balance sheet?
9,000.
So 1,80,000 divided by 9,000 comes out to be 20. इसका मतलब है कि प्रतीक्षा का हर शेयर, एक शेयर का वैल्यू 30 रुपए है एंड निधि का एक शेयर का वैल्यू 20 रुपीस है. Now, it also means that if you note that who is the purchasing company, we know that Pratiksha is the purchasing company and Nidhi is the vendor company. So this means Pratiksha is going to give certain shares to Nidhi, right? Because Pratiksha खरीद रही है निधि का business, so Pratiksha कुछ अपने shares देगी बदले में निधि को. अब question ये है, क्योंकि वो exchange ratio मांग रहा है कि भाई वो कितने shares देगी. Right, there are two ways. Okay, if you look at the LCM method, which is 30 और 20 का अगर मैं LCM निकालती हूँ तो मेरे पास 60 आता है, which also means that 20 is the number of share, is the intrinsic value for Nidhi and 30 is the intrinsic value for Pratiksha, which means 20 into 3 comes out to be 60 and 30 into 2 comes out to be 60. That's the technical part. But well, let's understand what does it actually mean. इसका मतलब क्या है? Okay. सो अगर आप देखो कि प्रतीक्षा के हर शेयर की वैल्यू है 30 रुपए और हर शेयर की निधि की वैल्यू है 20 रुपए. अब मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि प्रतीक्षा कितने शेयर्स देगी निधि को एक शेयर के बदले में. That is not so simple to find out. Can anybody tell me how much shares will Pratiksha give to Nidhi for one share of Nidhi? Since it is not as simple as कि एक शेयर के लिए 2 शेयर या 3 शेयर या 4 शेयर, because there is actually a fraction involved in this. So therefore, is it that, let me ask you this and listen to me very carefully, क्या निधि के 3 शेयर्स के लिए, I repeat, निधि के 3 शेयर्स के लिए, okay, are you listening to me very carefully, will Pratiksha for every 3 shares of Nidhi give 2 shares of Pratiksha? Yes or no? Just let me know.
Yes.
Yes, so that is what in short it basically means. Exchange value is we have to calculate. So there are two ways to do it. One is you calculate the LCM, you take the intrinsic value of both and then you reach the LCM by multiplying it via figure, which will also mean you can actually look at it. It's nothing but pure logic. Are you understanding it? Is it clear? Any question? Please ask if there is a doubt.
And will you please repeat
Yeah.
last portion?
Yeah, I'm saying, let me show it to you like this. So Pratiksha, one share equals to 30 rupees and Nidhi, one share equal to 20 rupees, right? So which obviously means that if you look at it, 20 into 3 is 60 and 30 into 2 is 60, which means for every 3 share of Nidhi, Pratiksha will give her 2 shares. Yes or no? Because दोनों का equal कितना हो रहा है? 60 हो रहा है ना यहाँ देखो. वैल्यू सेम होनी चाहिए. शेयर्स कितने मिलेंगे उससे हमें मतलब नहीं है. लेकिन एक्सचेंज रेशियो का मतलब ये है कि एक शेयर के बदले में कितना शेयर मिलेगा. अब भाई एक शेयर के बदले में 3/2 मिलेगा, 2/3 मिलेगा, ऐसे तो हम नहीं बोल सकते ना. वो होता नहीं है. Right? So which means for every 3 shares, she will get 2 shares. Is that clear? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So you're going to get one more question in homework. That's going to be illustration 6, guys. No, not 6. 6 तो already मैंने homework में दिया हुआ था. हाँ बोलो, कुछ कह रहे हो बेटा, बोलो.
हम शेयर की वैल्यू कैसे आई 30 and 20?
30 and 20 कैसे आई? हाँ, ये देखो ना बेटा. What did I say? I said the moment he says exchange ratio, I will have to calculate the net asset, that is the intrinsic value. What is the formula for intrinsic value? Net asset. What is net asset? Total asset minus external liability. That is this net asset divided by the number of shares. While for Nidhi, the net asset is 1,80,000 divided by the number of shares, that is 9,000.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay, I just want to, before I go ahead, I just want to confirm, are you guys able to do illustration 6 जो मैंने last time दिया था homework में? Done? Any doubts if you have, you can ask right now. कोई doubt है? हाँ जी. Is there a doubt? So I guess you understand the illustration 6 everyone has done. If not done, then please make sure you have done it. Maybe in the next class, I'll start by asking you out what is the answer of each and explain. Okay, fine. So right. Okay, now we're going to come to the last part and it's going to be the most important part in the accounting treatment. Okay, guys. So let me just minimize my Excel sheet and come back to my Word. So till here we have done. Now we are going to start with journal entries today. Now see, this entire chapter will include things like we are going to do the journal entries in 2 books. Vendor company's book and purchasing company's book. So if you remember, मैंने starting में ही बोल दिया था, पहली class में ही बोल दिया था, सबसे पहला step is the most important step whereby you're going to identify who is the vendor and who is the purchasing company. Okay, so today we are going to do who? The vendor company books. Sorry, in the books of purchasing company, I'm sorry, that we'll do later. We're going to do in the books of purchasing company. Now, who is the purchasing company? The company which is buying the shares or which is buying the business? Yes or no? Any question?
Yes.
Right. Now, we are going to talk about in the books of, I am repeating again, in the books of the purchasing company. Okay. Now this means, now please remember, ये जो अब मैंने आपको बोला 2 मेथड्स होते हैं, एक होता है परचेज मेथड, एक होता है मर्जर मेथड. ओके, टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द जर्नल एंट्रीज in the books of purchasing company using the purchase method, which means if any of the 5 conditions is not fulfilled, we are going to follow this method. Is it clear? I hope you are taking your notes. Okay, so let's understand now one by one, how are we going to proceed? Usually this is the flow of the journal entries we have, but depending on your condition or question, it might change. Okay, now the first entry always in the purchase method in the books of the purchasing company is going to be, so we are buying we're buying a business or you can actually think like this is an asset that we are buying the business. Okay. So what entry is going to be there is the first entry is going to be business purchase debited to the liquidator of vendor company. मतलब कि मेरे को ये बिजनेस मैंने खरीदा ओके एज ऑफ नाउ एंड ड्यू हो गया ये अमाउंट जो कि मुझे अमाउंट पे करना है किसको पे करना है मेरी लाइबिलिटी बढ़ गई किसकी तरफ लिक्विडेटर ऑफ द वेंडर कंपनी सो इज द फर्स्ट एंट्री क्लियर So please keep on writing it also. The first entry is always going to be business purchase to the liquidator of vendor company. Now most often one of the mistakes that you people do is जब आप question करते हो क्या करते हो आप उसको as it is लिख देते हो business purchase to the liquidator of vendor company. भाई vendor company कौन है उसका नाम आएगा question में. Is this clear? You have to be very careful. तभी हम first step क्या होता है we identify who's the vendor, who's the purchasing company. So whoever it is, you will write his name. So for instance, let's say in the above question, let's say यहाँ if we see the vendor company is Vrinda. So what I'll do is business purchase to liquidator of Vrinda Limited. ठीक है? Clear? Any doubt in the first entry? Please raise your hand if it is not clear. So the first entry is clear to all of you. Okay, now let's get a little complex. Now I am going to take over the assets and you have also discussed that in the net asset method or so. So what I'm going to do is all the assets that I take over, I'm going to debit them individually. For example, in the balance sheet you have debtors, in the balance sheet you have plant and machinery, in the balance sheet you have fixtures. So I'm going to write debtors debited, furniture debited, plant and machinery debited. So individually I have to write. ऐसे नहीं मैं total कर दूं assets को और लिख दूं various assets too. No. Okay. So what we do, the second entry is going to be, we are going to debit various assets individually to, obviously if I am taking over asset, मैंने assets को debit किया. अगर मैं liabilities को take over कर रही होंगी, तो मैं liabilities को credit करूंगी. So therefore the entry is going to be to various liabilities individually, which means to creditors, to bills payable, and so on. That is going to be the second entry. Now, पूरी नहीं हुई entry अभी. क्यों नहीं हुई? Let me explain to you. Because various assets that you have taken over, you have debited. Various liabilities that you have taken over, you have debited. And you're going to, credited. You're going to credit the business purchase. Now, nobody asked me this question that ma'am ये जो हम business purchase debit कर रहे हैं ये हम किस amount से करेंगे? Can anybody tell me? By which amount am I going to debit business purchase? Yes, anyone?
TC.
Exactly. Exactly. That is why what is our step-by-step procedure? First is we identify who's the vendor, who is the purchasing company. We identify whether it's the purchase method or merger method. And finally, we calculate the purchase consideration because if I don't have the purchase consideration, I cannot pass my first entry. So the amount by which I'm going to pass the first entry is going to be the amount of purchase consideration. And similarly, this is my first entry. And similarly, if you look at the second entry, it's going to be various assets to various liabilities to business purchase. Again, the amount by which I have purchased the business. Now here, the moment you will pass this entry, you will realize in the purchase method specifically, or maybe in other methods also, that ऐसा भी हो सकता है आप देखो कि assets let's say 10 लाख आ रहे हैं आपके. Okay, randomly मैं लिख देती हूँ यहाँ पे. ठीक है, let's say it is 10 lakh. Let's say liabilities आपकी 5 lakh है. Okay. And let's say आपका business purchase 6 lakh है. क्या ये entry complete हो गई? हाँ या नहीं? Anybody?
No, ma'am.
No. अब problem क्या है? Problem ये है कि credit side ज्यादा आ रही है. मतलब भाई मैंने तो ज्यादा पे कर दिया और business actually 10 लाख का है, मैंने 11 लाख पे कर दिया. It means I have a capital loss. When the credit side is greater than the debit side, there is a capital loss and I am going to debit the goodwill. Or it can be vice versa. Let me explain how. Let's say various assets is 12 lakh. Is the entry complete? No. Again, there is a difference of 1 lakh. It means there is a profit, capital profit. So I go to capital reserve. Okay, so let me explain this entry to you. It's very important that you're going to debit the assets, you're going to credit the liabilities, you're going to credit the business purchase, and then you're going to see which side is bigger or larger. So here you can write it in your what do you call notebooks, that if the debit side is greater than the credit side, I'm saying if the debit side is greater than the credit side, what am I going to do? Anybody?
Capital reserve.
Yes,
Reserve.
it means it's a capital profit and I'm going to credit the capital reserve with the balance amount. While if the credit side is greater than the debit side, it means there is a capital loss and I am going to debit the goodwill by the balancing figure. Okay, दोनों चीजें नहीं होंगी, दोनों में से एक ही होगी, या हो सकता है कुछ भी ना हो, depending on the question. Is this question clear? This is very important, guys. Any doubt? Any question? Okay, I'm going to repeat. When the debit side is greater than the credit side, I am going to put the balancing figure in the capital reserve. When the credit side is greater than the debit side, I am going to put the balancing figure in the debit side. That is, the goodwill is going to be debited. Is it clear? Right. So 2 entries are done. Now let's come to the third entry. Now I have to, ये क्या था? ये था जब हमारी डील हुई. पहली एंट्री was on the date of the deal that हम बिजनेस परचेज कर रहे हैं, लिक्विडेटर को ड्यू है हमारा इतना अमाउंट. फिर हमने एसेट टेक ओवर कर लिए, लाइबिलिटी टेक ओवर कर दिए, बैलेंस निकाल दिया. अब वो दिन आ गया जिस दिन मैं पेमेंट कर रही हूँ वेंडर को. अब मैं वेंडर को पेमेंट करती कैसे हूँ? बाय द परचेज कंसिडरेशन अमाउंट. हो सकता है उसे कैश दूं, हो सकता है उसे इक्विटी शेयर इशू करूं, हो सकता है उसे प्रेफरेंस शेयर इशू करूं. So the third entry is going to be liquidator of vendor company to bank to equity share capital to preference share capital. Is it clear? Also please note there is a possibility कि security payment अगर involved है तो उसको separately हम credit करेंगे. That is liquidator of vendor company to bank to equity share capital to preference share to security premium. Okay. Are the 3 entries clear, guys?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, Jeet. Thank you. So fine, the 3 entries are done. Now you will note in the question, people, that sometimes let me just talk about the merger and purchase difference again. If you remember, now यहाँ पे हमने क्या किया जब हम second entry कर रहे थे, क्योंकि ये purchase method है, so there will be in the balance sheet things like general reserve, etc., etc. Am I going to credit it? No. I repeat, since it is a purchase method, no funds are being credited here. Although जब हम merger करेंगे, we also call it as pooling of interest method. जो भी reserves वगैरह होते हैं, वो भी हम credit करते हैं, ठीक है? That is actually the difference. So now what is happening is, but in the balance sheet there is a possibility of some reserves which are known as statutory reserves. Now what are these statutory reserves? Statutory reserves are those reserves which are by statute, by law, you have to maintain them. Okay. Now, if there is any statutory reserve in your balance sheet, in the purchase method also, you are going to credit that. Now, the question here is, now the moment I am going to credit it, obviously I say to statutory reserve. Now, since I am crediting the statutory reserve, I'll have to debit something. Okay, we know that there is a debit side, there is a credit side. So what will I debit? What can I debit here? So there is an account that is specially prepared for the statutory reserve. As against the statutory reserve, I am going to debit the amalgamation adjustment account. This is known as the amalgamation adjustment account. In the balance sheet, it is shown under the non-current assets. That is within the non-current asset, it is shown as other assets. Any question? If you have a question, please ask me right now. कोई question है तो पूछिए, then I'll go on. So this is for recording the statutory reserves. Okay, so this is the 4th entry. Before I go on very quickly, let's quickly recap the 4 entries. Starting with Anirudh, can you tell me the first entry, Anirudh? Anirudh, are you there? Not there. Anisha?
Ma'am,
Anisha? Yes, please tell me the first entry, beta.
business purchase debit to liquidator of vendor company.
Thank you. Anwar, are you there? Not there. Dipansh, second entry.
Yes, ma'am. Assets to liabilities to purchase
Business
purchase
purchase.
con business purchases, and in case of loss, there is a capital reserve, and in case of
Oh,
profits,
no,
goodwill.
no, 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 no. In case of profit, there is a capital reserve. In case of capital loss, there is a goodwill.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Divya, next entry.
Ma'am, next is the entry of making the payment, which is liquidated or vendor company account debited to bank account, to equity share capital, to preference share capital, and in case there's securities premium, so we'll credit to securities premium.
Okay, thank you. Jeet, next entry.
Ma'am, making payment. Uh, Ma'am, I
नहीं,
think it is over.
पेमेंट हो गई नहीं नहीं स्टैट्यूटरी रिजर्व की क्या एंट्री
Yes,
होगी?
statutory reserves. Ma'am, we have to make a statutory reserve as it is a mandate by the statute, and the entry will be the amalgamation adjustment reserve to the particular statutory reserve.
Right, thank you, thank you. Now see guys, in addition to this, there can be things like, let's say you have taken over the debenture holder, right? So we are going to make the payment. If you remember the question we just did, उसमें उसने दिया हुआ था कि debenture holder को हमने ये देना है, ठीक है? क्योंकि वो purchase consideration का part नहीं था, इसलिए journal entry में मुझे उसकी payment करनी है. So how will I make the payment for the debenture holder? That is depending on debentures टू बैंक, टू इक्विटी शेयर, टू प्रेफरेंस शेयर. मतलब डिपेंड करता है कि मैंने इशू क्या किया है डिबेंचर को. वट एवर आई एम इशूइंग द डिबेंचर होल्डर, आई मेक द पेमेंट. सो दिस इज फॉर द पेमेंट ऑफ डिबेंचर होल्डर. नाउ फाइनली also a possibility that there is a liquidation expense. Now the moment if we are buying certain what do you call business and we are paying a liquidation expense, the entry for that is goodwill to liquidation expense. And finally, if there is a preliminary expense also, the entry for preliminary expense is going to be preliminary expense to bank. Last thing, guys, please remember there is a possibility in the balance sheet you have certain goodwill, and when you pass the second entry, you realize there was a capital reserve. Now, can a business have capital profit and capital loss at the same time? Yes or no? It doesn't make sense, no? You have the capital profit also and capital loss also. So you're going to write it off in the sense. So whatever you have, if you have both the goodwill and capital reserve, so you write off the goodwill. That is capital reserve to goodwill. क्योंकि at a time balance sheet में आप एक ही चीज दिखाओगे, या तो capital reserve दिखाओगे, whatever is the difference, और या तो goodwill दिखाओगे. So this question में दिया नहीं होगा शायद, लेकिन क्वेश्चन में शायद बैलेंस शीट में आपको कैपिटल रिजर्व दिया होगा, और जब आप सेकेंड एंट्री पास करोगे तो आपके पास गुडविल आएगा. तो आपको अपने दिमाग से लास्ट एंट्री में चेक करना है कि क्या मेरे पास कैपिटल रिजर्व और गुडविल दोनों है. अगर दोनों है तो आई विल हैव टू पास दिस एंट्री कैपिटल रिजर्व टू गुडविल. इज दिस क्लियर? एनी डाउट?
मैम
हाँ बोलो बेटा, डाउट्स प्लीज कम ऑन.
जो लास्ट में हम लोग एंट्री करें रिजर्व टू गुडविल, मैम आई लिसनिंग मी.
हाँ खुशी बोलो.
मैम वो हम लोग किस अमाउंट से करेंगे? जो बैलेंस शीट में कैपिटल रिजर्व पे अकाउंट होगा वो, या फिर जो डिफरेंस आया होगा?
जैसे सपोज मैं बताती हूँ, फॉर एग्जांपल बैलेंस शीट में तुम्हें 10,000 का कैपिटल रिजर्व ऑलरेडी दिया हुआ है, ठीक है? 10,000 का बैलेंस शीट में कैपिटल रिजर्व ऑलरेडी है, और 5,000 का गुडविल आपके पास सेकंड एंट्री से आया. विल एनीबडी टेल मी क्या एंट्री होगी? बैलेंस शीट में यू हैव 10,000 कैपिटल रिजर्व एंड सेकंड एंट्री गिव्स यू 5,000 गुडविल. व्हाट विल बी द एंट्री? एनीवन? The entry will be 5,000. हाँ जीत बोलो.
Ma'am, capital reserve account debit to goodwill 5,000.
Correct. Kushi, is it clear? All right. Jeet, you had a doubt. Were you saying something?
Can you turn it on the screen?
Yeah, can I share the screen? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. The ma'am entry number 7. Ma'am, can you please
Yeah.
clear?
Right. So whenever we are starting up a business, it's like, what are we doing is that one business is you are starting a new business. So there might be certain preliminary expenses that you will have to pay. And so if you are paying those preliminary expenses, then the entry will be preliminary expense to bank. Is it clear, Jeet?
Ma'am, it is for the vendor company.
Yeah, this entire no, not for the vendor company. You're not understanding. Listen, what we are saying is ये क्या है? ये entry तो purchasing company में हो रही है, purchasing company की book में हो रही है. अगर आपको दिया होगा question में कि purchasing company ने payment करी है preliminary expense की, तो आप उसकी books में एंट्री करोगे preliminary expense to bank, क्योंकि vendor तो गया, vendor की तो company बंद हो रही है. Amalgamation में एक नई company खुल रही है, तभी तो होगा preliminary expense.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right. Okay, fine. All right. So what we'll do is we'll just do a bits and pieces of illustration 9 just to get the feel of what we have just done. Okay. And then I will be winding up the class. Just give me a second. I'll share the question with you guys so that we can just start it. We will not finish it, but because हमने कर ली है, खाली theoretical entries करने का फायदा नहीं है जब तक हम उसे practically समझे ना. So I'm sharing something with you. Just give me a second. Just a minute. Yeah, so 2 pages I'm sharing, guys. Right, it's there. Please check. Have you received it? So this is kind of a, full-fledged question that it's not even full-fledged. You're required to show the balance sheet. Yeah, it is kind of a full-fledged question that we are going to do in our entire syllabus. So we'll go step by step. Don't worry. I'm giving you 5 minutes to just read the question. Then I'll ask you a couple of questions and we'll see how much are you able to grasp. 5 minutes to read the question, please. Just raise your hands when you're done. I'm just waiting for your hand raise and then we'll start. Jeet is done. Jeet, meanwhile, others are reading. Just write down in your registers the vendor company's name and the purchasing company's name and try to find out the purchase consideration.
Sure, ma'am.
Tanu, you can also continue by what I have said.
Okay, ma'am.
Others, come on, just raise your hand when you're done the reading. Okay, so yes, who is the vendor? Who's going to tell me who's the vendor?
B Limited.
Right, which
B
means
Limited.
A is going to be the purchasing company. This is how we are going to do the illustration 9. Is it clear? Okay, so let's begin now. It says that I've been given a balance sheet. Okay, now my next question, guys, is by which method am I going to calculate the purchase consideration? Can anybody tell me that? Which method shall I follow?
Purchase.
Net payment method.
Yes, it's going to be net payment method because nothing has been said about whether you're going to take over the assets, at what value are you going to take over, and anything about exchange ratio or intrinsic value. Also, if you note the first 2 points in the question, clearly instructions have been given to us that how the payment has been made. It says issued 35,000 equity shares of 10 each at par to the equity shareholder of B and issued 15% preference shares of 100 each to discharge the preference shareholder of B Limited at 10% premium. Right? So please make the format, all of you. If you will just make the format for it, it's going to be, I'll do it with you. Payment to. And then it's going to be payment in, then the calculation, and then finally the amount. First figure, it says issued 35,000 equity shares of this to equity shareholder. यहाँ पे क्या लिखूं payment to में? Anyone?
B Limited.
No, not B Limited. I'm going to write equity shareholder of B Limited.
Equity
Shareholder of B Limited. And payment in में क्या लिखूं?
Equity shares of A Limited.
Right, correct. So it says equity shares, right? Equity shares A Limited. Now, what is going to be the calculation? Is showing 35,000 equity shares of 10 each. क्या लिखूं?
35,000 into 10, 3,50,000.
Correct. So it's going to be 35,000 into 10, and this is going to be 3,50,000. Okay, now a little bit of tricky thing we have here. The next one, it says issued this much preference shares to preference shareholder. क्या लिखूं यहाँ payment to में?
Preference shareholders of B.
Preference holders.
Preference shareholder of B Limited. And payment in में?
Preference shares.
Shares of A Limited. What is the calculation? Okay, this is going to be a little tricky, guys. What is the calculation? He says issued 15% preference shares of 100 each to discharge the preference shareholders of B Limited at 10% premium. Yes. So we have हमारे पास preference share balance sheet अगर मैं देखूं तो मेरे पास already B Limited के 1,70,000 के preference shares हैं. Okay, if I look at that, I can show it to you like this. 1,70,000 के preference shares मेरे पास हैं और हर preference share कितने का है? 100 rupees का. It means I have 17,000 preference shares or 1,700. बताओ.
1700.
1700 preference shares. Okay, so he's saying that you have to issue 15% preference shares of 100 each, underline the line 100 each, to discharge the preference shareholders of B Limited at 10% premium. Guys, now here this 10% premium doesn't mean, वो कह रहा है 100 each पे मैंने issue करना है, बट ये जो प्रीमियम है ये इस 10% के प्रीमियम का क्या मतलब है? प्रीमियम का मतलब है जो 1700 शेयर्स है मेरे पास, ओके, इस पे 10% अगर मैं लगाऊं, मेरे पास आ गया इन दोनों को एड अप करके मैंने एक्चुअली कितने इशू किए शेयर्स 1870. सो दिस इज गोइंग टू बी 1870 into 100, and therefore I'm going to get 18700. Sorry, 000. Is it clear? Yes or no? Please tell me. ये बहुत ही ट्रिकी पॉइंट है एक, which I'll explain to you. हाँ बेटा बोलो.
Ma'am, I have solved it as 1700 shares of 110 rupees.
हाँ, आंसर उससे भी यही आ रहा है, लेकिन यस आंसर उससे भी यही आ रहा है, लेकिन यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दी व्हाट यू कॉल लैंग्वेज हियर. देखो क्या कहता है वो, इशूड 15% प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स ऑफ 100 ईच. अगर वो यही कह देता इशूड 15% प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स ऑफ 100 ईच एट अ प्रीमियम, तो उसका मतलब होता कि भाई हर शेयर पे 10% का प्रीमियम लग रहा है, लेकिन वो यहां नहीं बोला उसने. उसने बोला issued 15% preference shares of 100 each to discharge the preference shareholders of B Limited at 10% premium. ऐसे कुछ और भी क्वेश्चंस आगे होंगे, ठीक है, जहां पे हमें ये देखना है कि कैसे वो प्रीमियम कर रहा है. तो हाउ आर यू इंटरप्रेटिंग इट डिपेंड्स ऑन दैट कि हाउ यू आर गोइंग टू मेक द कैलकुलेशन. So I think with that, I've actually come to the end of my class because the time is up and I also have a class. So I'll stop here. What I'm telling you to do is I'm going to share with you two other questions. You're going to try this question. In the sense, what are you going to do? PC तो निकल गई आपकी. निकल गई है आपकी, तो I'm sure you can try the entries also. Can you try? You have an entire week. So you will have in all 3 questions that you will have to solve. I'll send it after the class immediately. ये वाला question तो already भेज दिया है, बाकी 2 question मैं भेज दूंगी. Okay, any doubt, any question? Shall I stop my class? Okay.